I stood at the boarding gate, clutching my ticket so tightly the paper had warmed in my hand. Los Angeles was behind me, like a stage after the play was over, lights turned off, actors gone, leaving only fragments of someone else's lines on the floor. I had run away, from a job that had stopped being a dream, from a relationship that asked me to be quieter, softer, lighter than I was. Ahead of me waited Chicago, a new space that both beckoned and frightened me, like an open window into a night scattered with lightning on the horizon. The cabin smelled of coffee, dry air from the vents, and neatly folded blankets. My seat was by the window, and I felt a small relief. Watching cities shrink into maps always helped me arrange my thoughts. Next to me sat a man. Tall, dark hair combed back, the posture of someone used to keeping control. A watch gleamed on his wrist, not ostentatious but clear. Time was his real currency. "Are you afraid of flying?" His voice was low, almost gentle, when I exhaled too loudly as the plane taxied. "Do I look like it?" I smiled faintly, keeping my eyes on the glass. "You're gripping that ticket as if it could save you from falling," he replied. There was no mockery, only interested attention. The plane rolled, lifted, the world sliding slowly beneath us. As we climbed higher, I felt the earth reluctantly release me. I didn't know yet that this altitude would teach me to breathe differently. The man beside me felt like a shoreline, solid ground to rest my foot on when waves rose higher than I thought possible. I didn't know his name yet, but curiosity already bloomed, warm and insistent. When we reached cruising altitude, the sky was velvet and steady, as if someone had pinned silver dust against a dark curtain. I sipped water, but my throat stayed dry, my thoughts too loud. The man beside me leafed through documents with a concentration unusual for a passenger, every movement measured. "Are you flying on business, or into a new life?" he asked suddenly, voice calm. The question hit so precisely I forgot to breathe. "Do you always start conversations with destinations?" I answered with sarcasm, hiding unease behind lightness. "Sometimes one short question begins the longest conversations," he said, finally meeting my eyes. They held no rush, only the attentiveness of someone who listens between pauses. "New life," I whispered, as if speaking too loudly might break it. The silence between us changed. It stopped being a barrier and became space where real words could live. The plane jolted slightly. Instinctively I grabbed the armrest, our hands touched. The contact was absurdly brief yet devastatingly significant. "You really are afraid of heights," he murmured, as if speaking of more than altitude. "I'm not afraid of falling," I said. "I'm afraid of falling into wrong choices again." He smiled faintly, as if he recognized himself in my words. "I'm only afraid of losses," he said softly. "They last longer than flights." A flight attendant brought coffee. Steam rose like a pale cloud, the scent of roasted beans filling our small space. We reached for the cups at the same time, fingers brushing, neither of us pulling away. Warmth spread through me, not from the drink, but from the acceptance in his attention. I still didn't know his name, yet my own name felt different already, as if it was learning how to echo. The night outside the window looked like a living map, dark lakes, fractured ribbons of roads, lacework cities glowing faintly. I listened not to the engines but to his breathing, and suddenly felt the urge to say something true. "My name is Holly," I said, letting it sound like a key opening a lock. "Elias," he replied with a small nod, as if completing an unspoken ritual. We spoke of what leaves marks. I confessed my years in the film industry, loving it for stories, hating it for contracts where every clause meant someone's silence. I told him about the man I had married, how I'd lost myself beside him, agreeing too often to be smaller. Elias listened carefully, pausing in the right places. "And you?" I asked. "Business," he said shortly, not evasive, just measured. "Numbers, concrete plans that turn into streets. Sometimes I forget why I count when I can't measure relief for anyone." His gaze darkened. I didn't press. Some stories must grow until they're ready to be spoken. The plane shivered with turbulence. This time I didn't move my hand away, neither did he. We sat with our palms barely touching, two strangers not ashamed of closeness born from air currents. "Do you ever feel like you're flying not to a city but into another life?" he asked. "Yes," I admitted. "It's terrifying. And thrilling." "Terrifying and thrilling is honest," Elias said. And I realized honesty itself could be a place soft enough to land. Time stretched in the sky like clear rubber and fell away between words. Passengers dozed, read, or sank into thin blankets. The indicator lights glowed evenly, calming the cabin. Elias and I spoke in quieter tones, which made our words heavier with meaning. He mentioned family not in the past tense but present, as if their presence still stood in the doorway of his days. I didn't ask why the door had closed. I confessed openly. I had fled Los Angeles not only from work but from a husband whose presence dimmed me in photographs week by week. "I don't want to be convenient scenery," I said firmly. "Good," he replied softly. "Scenery burns first when someone switches on the real light." The attendant brought coffee again, cups clicking lightly against trays, steam curling upward, roasted scent mingling with cold air. We reached at once, fingers meeting and staying. I thought, maybe closeness doesn't need reasons. It begins like takeoff, suddenly the grass becomes a blurred green ribbon, and you're aloft. "Perhaps one meeting can change everything," Elias said. Not a question, but a hypothesis he seemed ready to test. "Or maybe we change ourselves first, and that's why we meet," I countered, watching his reflection in the window's dark glass. He smiled, approving my audacity. Somewhere behind us a child cried, soothed by a mother's whispered lullaby. The quiet song made our small space warmer. My shoulders relaxed, as if invisible straps had loosened inside me. For the first time in a long while, I let myself breathe without correcting anything. The captain's announcement snapped us back: "Descending soon, fasten seatbelts, raise tray tables." The magic of our private film dissolved into instructions. A sudden sorrow hit me, as if someone had cut a sentence in half. We stayed silent. This silence was no longer space but fragile cloth, too precious to tear. Only when the golden rivers of city lights appeared beneath the wing did I whisper, "Are you staying long in Chicago?" "As long as I find what I'm looking for," he said after a pause. I didn't ask what. Some answers vanish if chased. Wheels touched the runway, air turned from weightless to dense, phones lit up, habits revived. We walked down the narrow aisle, pulled along by the tide of passengers. I turned to thank him, but saw only his back vanishing ahead. The crowd thickened in the jet bridge. I hurried, but the stream of people split us apart like a river guarding its banks. By the time I reached arrivals, he was gone. I searched the faces, circled the hall twice, phone in hand. I typed Elias into every search bar, scrolling through profiles, none of them his. My chest hollowed. I realized I didn't even know his last name. I bought coffee, listening to beans grind and water hiss, as if the noise might anchor me. Couples embraced, drivers held name cards, laughter rippled. But my story had ended in silence. Sometimes fate disappears around a corner before you can follow. I waited one more minute, then finally let go, exhaling his name into the crowd, as if it might still find him. Chicago's airport buzzed like a hive. People rushed past, embracing, laughing, shouting into phones. Suitcases clattered across tiles, taxis blinked outside, announcements boomed overhead. I stood in the middle of it all, holding my suitcase, realizing I had lost what mattered most. Elias was gone. The man who had spoken of fear and loss, whose hand had steadied mine in turbulence, had dissolved into the crowd. I walked the corridors again and again, scanning faces, gray-haired, smiling, stern, distracted, but none of them were his. I pulled out my phone, typed his name. Elias brought endless profiles, but not the right one. I didn't know his last name, had nothing to anchor my search. The absurdity stung. We had spoken so openly, yet I didn't have a single way to find him again. My heart beat in time with a commercial flashing on a giant screen, too fast, too loud. The emptiness inside me deepened, as if something true had been stolen before I could even name it. I bought coffee and set my suitcase by my feet, staring at the arrival's door where strangers kept spilling through. They had reunions, families, plans. I had only a memory at 30,000 feet that already felt like a dream. I realized I had been standing too long. The world kept moving forward, and I was still gripping air. Finally, I lifted my suitcase and stepped into the city, each step pulling me further from his presence. Chicago greeted me with chill winds off the lake, cutting through my coat. I rented a small apartment near downtown and tried to start again, building life from a blank page. I found work at a contemporary art gallery. At first I was just an assistant, hanging paintings, arranging catalogs, setting up exhibits. I lost myself in colors and canvases, trying to bury the face that haunted me at night. Each morning I walked familiarizing streets, the corner cafe, the bookstore with windows crowded by novels, the dog sprawled outside the flower shop. Slowly, the city wove me into its fabric. But every crowd became a search. Dark-haired men made my heart lurch, only to disappoint me. Recognition followed by disappointment, that was the rhythm of my days. At night, returning home, I replayed our flight. We had spoken as though we'd known each other for years. How could something so deep vanish so quickly? Friends laughed when I admitted I still thought of him. You remember a stranger from a plane? But they hadn't sat in the dark sky, hearing words that reshaped the course of life. Sometimes a few hours outweigh years. And always, when I turned off the light, his voice came back, I'm only afraid of losses. And I whispered back, so am I. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the city, Elias sat in his office high above the streets. Chicago's lights reflected on the glass walls, making him feel like an outsider peering in. Contracts, blueprints, and figures littered his desk. His team was planning a new housing project, meant to change a neighborhood skyline. Yet he couldn't shake the sense that he was building not for people, but for faceless numbers. He remembered the flight. The woman with honest eyes and a voice that cut through defenses. He regretted not giving her anything, no card, no number, not even a clue. It felt like fate had offered him a gift only to snatch it away. He opened his laptop, typed Holly into a search. Countless results appeared, none of them her. Closing the lid, he felt the cruelty of memory, showing a possibility, then erasing it. Elias knew loss well. His marriage had collapsed, leaving silence in his home and a bitter residue of guilt. Now he feared repeating it. Still, her words echoed, I'm running from expectations that aren't mine. He rose, walked to the window, pressed his palm to the cold glass. Somewhere across the city, she was also looking out. He sensed their roads were not finished. Weeks slipped by. I learned to love Chicago in fragments. I photographed old red brick buildings, discovered hidden cafes where coffee came in hand-thrown ceramic cups. I found a bench by the river and made it mine, sitting evenings with a notebook, trying to write. The words came slowly, but I forced them, believing that if I captured even fragments of feeling, I could make sense of them. Yet everywhere I went, I searched for him. He haunted my sleep, the plane's hum, the scent of coffee, his steady gaze. I woke with the impression we had kept talking, only to lose the words on waking. Once, walking down a busy street, I saw a man approaching. His stride, his posture, even his silhouette, my heart stopped. Breath caught in my throat. But when he drew near, it wasn't him. Tears burned my eyes. It felt like mockery, the city taunting me with illusions, forcing me to replay the loss again and again. That night I opened my notebook and wrote, my greatest fear isn't starting a new life, it's losing the chance to see him again. The words stood stark on the page. And I knew they were true. A year passed. I had grown steady at the gallery, promoted to help manage exhibitions. This world became mine, artists, collectors, opening nights with wine and conversations about meaning. People saw my smile and believed I was happy. But deep inside, I carried that night above the clouds. It wasn't something I could erase. It was woven into me. We prepared for a major opening, one meant to draw the city's elite. I ran between rooms, checking lights, straightening details, breathing urgency into every corner. This was my responsibility, proof I could build something new. I didn't know that Elias too was preparing for the evening. His company had sponsored the event. His name appeared in newspapers, but I hadn't turned to that page. Our lives ran parallel like twin rivers, close but not yet merging. And somewhere deep inside, I sensed it, fate doesn't leave stories unfinished. Our crossing was inevitable. Morning in Chicago was sharp and cool, the wind off the lake carrying the scent of water and steel. I walked to the gallery, wrapped in my scarf, thinking only of the exhibition opening that night. It was important: collectors, journalists, patrons. My chance to prove I could handle more than routine tasks. The city felt almost familiar now. I knew its rhythm, the traffic light that always turned green just as I stepped off the curb, the saxophone player in the subway, the barista who remembered my order without asking. Still, I lived in two realities. In one, my work, friends, evenings under gallery lights. In the other, the shadow of that flight, refusing to fade. A year had passed, yet I hadn't forgotten. Friends teased me, "You still think about a stranger from a plane?" They didn't understand. It hadn't been chance. Some conversations change direction like rivers, carving new landscapes inside you. I made coffee before leaving home and looked out the window. The city's lights blurred into a watercolor painting. A strange anticipation stirred in me, an ache of something approaching. I pushed it aside, work needed my focus. I gathered my notes and left. It was supposed to be an ordinary day. I didn't know yet, by tonight, everything would change again. The gallery glowed, polished floors, white walls, canvases ready for their audience. Staff hurried to adjust lights, align frames, fine-tune every angle. I walked through with my notebook, making last-minute corrections. This opening had to be flawless. As guests began to arrive, my nerves tightened. The atmosphere felt like the moment before a curtain rises, fragile, charged. Men and women in tailored suits, dresses shimmering under the spotlights, champagne glasses chiming. I stopped in front of a painting, an abstract of a night city, wide strokes of light. It reminded me of what I had seen from 30,000 feet a year ago. The thought sent a pang through me. And then, his voice. Low, slightly rough, unforgettable. He wasn't speaking to me, but I froze. My heart slammed against my ribs. It couldn't be. A city this vast, thousands of people, and yet I knew instantly. There he was. Elias. Standing near the entrance, surrounded by a group of guests, his posture precise, his suit dark and sharp. He looked the same and yet changed, more polished, a touch more distant, but unmistakable. Our eyes met. Time fractured. The music faded, conversations blurred. There was only his face, familiar, achingly so. My breath caught. I stepped forward, then hesitated. What could I say? Hi, do you remember me from that flight? Ridiculous. Maybe he had buried it, maybe it meant nothing to him. But then he began walking toward me. Slowly, carefully, like a man afraid that if he moved too quickly, I would vanish. The hall stretched and shrank all at once. My heart pounded in rhythm with each of his steps. When he was close enough, I couldn't help but smile, trembling. The lights seemed to shift around us, leaving just the two of us in focus. We stopped in the center of the gallery, face to face. I smiled nervously. He spoke first, his voice steady. Holly. Hearing my name in his voice sent a shiver down my spine. You remember? How could I forget a conversation at 30,000 feet? I laughed, though my voice shook. Around us, people moved, glasses clinked, the music played. But none of it touched us. We slipped out to a side corridor, away from curious eyes. The quiet was grounding. Elias raked a hand through his hair, as though steadying himself. I looked for you, he confessed. I thought I'd lost you forever. My throat tightened. I searched too. But how can you find someone when all you know is a first name? We both laughed, softly, painfully. The sound carried relief and grief, a whole year of absence compressed into a fragile moment. After the event, we stepped out into the city night. Chicago glowed with restless lights, cars rushing past, the hum of life unbroken. We walked together, almost afraid to let go. I truly thought I'd never find you again, Elias said. I even imagined buying every seat on that same flight the next week, just in case. But I didn't know your last name. And I typed yours into searches 100 times, I admitted. Nothing came up. We laughed again, but it wasn't carefree laughter. It was laughter seasoned by 12 long months apart, by the ache of nearly losing something you'd never really had. At the corner, the traffic light flicked green. Elias stopped, looked at me with steady eyes. Maybe fate decided to give us a second chance. I nodded. And inside me, a vow formed, this time, I wouldn't let go. We began seeing each other more often. At first, it felt accidental. I'd leave the gallery and somehow find him waiting nearby, or I'd stop at my cafe only to see him step inside. But soon it became intentional. He called, we arranged, and every meeting felt like a celebration, even if it was just a walk down a busy street. I found myself laughing again, genuinely, as though my heart had remembered how. He listened in a way that made words pour out. I told him about my childhood, my dream of writing scripts, my fear that had driven me from Los Angeles. With Elias, my weaknesses didn't feel shameful. They felt like truths that mattered. Yet I couldn't ignore the shadows in him. Sometimes his gaze drifted, far away, his expression tightening as if haunted by memories he wasn't ready to share. I wanted to ask, but I was afraid to break the fragile balance that kept us steady. One evening we walked along the lake. The wind whipped the water into restless waves that slapped the seawall. I felt suddenly small in the noise, like I might be swept away. Without a word, Elias reached for my hand. His fingers were warm, firm, grounding. I smiled into the dark water, feeling the weight lift. What we were building wasn't chance, it was something sturdier, brick by brick, a structure made of honesty and trust. Yet I knew storms could come. And I wondered, would what we were building be strong enough to survive? We sat by the river one evening, the city lights shimmering on the surface. The silence between us wasn't heavy, it was waiting. Finally, I spoke. I didn't just leave Los Angeles because of work, I confessed. I had a husband. He wanted me to be someone else, smaller, quieter. And for too long, I agreed. Until one day I realized I'd lost myself. Chicago was my escape. From him, and from the version of me who let it happen. Elias's face remained serious, but not judgmental. His eyes stayed on me, steady, absorbing every word. Tears pressed at the corners of my eyes, but I held them back. I don't want to hide anymore, I added softly. He leaned closer, his voice low. I understand. Because I lived in a trap too. I waited for more, but he turned his gaze to the water, the ripples reflecting broken light. The silence stretched long. I realized his story also carried scars. He wasn't ready to open them. So I didn't press. Instead, I took his hand. Together we sat, listening to the current carry away our secrets. We grew closer in the weeks that followed. Morning coffee, late walks, laughter over trivial things. It felt like we were weaving something steady. Then one evening, Elias broke the silence. I was married, he said as we shared dinner in a quiet restaurant. It ended like an earthquake, loud, destructive. The house collapsed, and I'm still walking among the ruins. I watched him closely. He looked strong, composed, but I could see the weight behind his eyes. I'm afraid of letting anyone in again, he admitted. I don't know if I could survive another loss. His words sank into me, deep and sharp. They mirrored my own fears. We were two people shaped by escape, both trying to learn trust again. It was a dangerous symmetry, comfort and risk bound together. I reached across the table, touching his hand. "I can't promise it will be easy," I said. "But I'm here, if you're willing to trust." He nodded, and something shifted in his eyes. A spark, fragile, but alive. Hope. Our days grew fuller, warmth threaded with tension. Then came the night of our first real fight. We had planned to meet for dinner. I arrived late, 30 minutes behind. He stood outside the restaurant, arms crossed, jaw set, eyes hard. "Do you always run when things get difficult?" he demanded. I blinked, startled. "It's just lateness, Elias. People are late." "This isn't about time," he snapped. "It's about disappearing. About how you left Los Angeles. About how you'd vanish again if things got too real." His words struck like thunder. Anger flared inside me. "And you? You hide behind your walls. You don't even let me know what you're feeling." Silence crashed between us, heavier than any turbulence. Around us, the city pulsed, laughter, footsteps, neon, but we stood in the middle of it, divided by fear. I saw clearly, our scars were colliding, raw against raw. And though I didn't want to leave, he turned away first. After the fight, silence settled between us like frost. No calls, no texts. My phone stayed mute, his name unlit. I drifted through the city as though directionless. Everywhere reminded me of him, the cafe where we had laughed, the riverside bench where we had whispered truths. At night I woke from dreams where he was still beside me. The emptiness on waking felt unbearable. It was as though fate had repeated itself, giving me someone only to steal him away again. One evening I sat by my window, the rain streaking glass like tears. My suitcase stood half-packed by the door. The old temptation returned, to run. To leave before it hurt worse. Maybe running was all I knew. But something resisted. I remembered his voice, "I'm only afraid of losses. If I left now, I wouldn't just be running. I'd be proving him right." I closed the suitcase but didn't take it with me. Hope, faint but stubborn, kept glowing. Somewhere deep down, I believed, our story wasn't finished. The days after our fight dragged like fog. I went to the gallery, did my work, smiled at visitors, but inside there was only emptiness. Elias was gone, no calls, no messages, no trace. I tried convincing myself it had been a brief spark, not meant to last. But my heart refused to believe. Every knock at the door, every unfamiliar figure in the crowd, sent my pulse racing. Friends said time would dull it. But nothing dulled. It was as if time itself refused to move forward without him. I knew I could run again. Book a flight, pack the suitcase, disappear into another city. That had always been my way. But this time something held me back. His words echoed, "I'm only afraid of losses. If I left now, I'd be proving him right, and betraying myself." One evening I sat by the window, the city lights spilling like broken pearls. My suitcase stood waiting by the door, half-packed. I placed my hand on it and whispered aloud, surprising myself. "No. I'm staying." It felt like a vow, spoken not to him but to myself. For the first time, I wasn't running from fear. I was choosing to remain, even in the uncertainty. The next evening, just as I was about to close the suitcase for good, there was a knock. I froze. My heart thudded so hard I almost dropped the handle. When I opened the door, Elias stood there. Exhausted, shadows under his eyes, but real. "I can't lose you again," he said, voice trembling. "I already vanished once in that crowd. I can't survive a second time." Tears stung my eyes. He reached out his hand, hesitant, as though afraid I'd step back. "I was afraid," he admitted. "Afraid to speak, afraid to let you see me weak. But without you, this city means nothing." The suitcase gaped behind me, half filled. His presence filled the space instead. I saw it clearly, this was the moment of choice. Leave, or stay. Lose, or trust. I stepped forward and placed my hand in his. We sat together in my apartment. The suitcase remained open, a silent reminder of what could have been. My heart pounded as I met his eyes. I was afraid, I confessed. Afraid you meant too much. That if it fell apart, I wouldn't survive. So I thought leaving first would hurt less. And I was afraid to let you in, he said. I thought if I opened up, I'd be left empty again. Our words lingered in the quiet. We had both admitted the weakest truths. And somehow, the honesty didn't break us, it steadied us. So maybe we try differently, I said. No running. No walls. He smiled then, a real smile, unguarded. We'll try, he whispered. I walked over, closed the suitcase, and pushed it aside. For the first time in years, staying felt braver than leaving. We stepped outside together. Chicago met us with rain. Drops fell heavy, streaking our hair, our faces. People raised umbrellas, hurried into cars, but we didn't move. Elias tightened his grip on my hand. Remember the turbulence on the plane? He asked. How could I forget? I smiled. I was terrified then. But with you beside me, it was easier. I'm terrified now too. But with you, it feels different. I looked into his eyes, the rain washing over us both. The city blurred around us. This wasn't an ending. It was the beginning we had both feared to claim. In the middle of the street we stopped. Cars honked, strangers stared, but none of it mattered. He leaned in, and our lips met. The kiss wasn't desperate. It was necessary, like air after too long holding your breath. In that moment, I knew, we wouldn't lose each other again. We stood in the rain, arms wrapped tight, and I felt every past escape dissolve. It was as if we were flying again, but higher than any plane could take us. No metal, no engines, just trust lifting us above the city. I knew the future wouldn't be flawless. Past wounds don't vanish. There would be arguments, shadows, echoes of old pain. But now we faced them together, and that changed everything. Elias looked into my eyes, his voice steady. 30,000 feet was only the beginning. The real flight starts now. Tears mixed with rain on my cheeks, but I smiled. Yes. Because one meeting really can change everything. His embrace was home. Around us, the rain blurred the world until only we remained, two people who had once been strangers in the sky, now finally choosing the ground together. It wasn't an ending. It was the first page of the life we dared to believe in. And we were no longer afraid of the height.